President Kennedy and Governor John Connally have been cut down by assassins' bullets in downtown Dallas.
Two priests who were with the president have reported that the president is dead.
Someone, and I should say someone, has been arrested in one of the downtown theaters.
Lee Oswald has been charged with the murder of President Kennedy, but he has made no statement, he has signed nothing, and has admitted no part in the president's death.
This class that you people have been given, but I emphatically deny these charges.
I am presently in the basement of the Dallas Municipal Building, and it is like an armed camp. Police officials are frankly worried. They don't want anything to happen to Oswald. They want to make sure he is safely transferred to the county jail and that he does stand trial and is convicted.
What if Lee Harvey Oswald had never been shot? What if everything went smoothly and Oswald had been transferred to the county jail? What if he had his day in court?
November 22nd, 1963. 3 shots changed this country and scarred this city. I'm Gloria Campos. For the past 50 years, we've watched the moments that followed the gunfire play out as slow-motion chaos. A president killed, a country brought to its knees, and the man believed to be responsible for President John F. Kennedy's death, Lee Harvey Oswald, an American, a former Marine. Oswald claimed innocence but never got the chance to be tried. He was killed 2 days after his arrest. Now, nearly 50 years later, his trial is playing out in this Dallas courtroom, overlooking the very place where President John F. Kennedy was shot. So many questions remain about that day. Why? Did he act alone? What would Oswald's defense have been? And would he have taken the stand? Things we'll never know, but perhaps this mock trial years later will provide some insight. The State Bar of Texas has chosen some major players to take part. Leading the prosecution, U.S. Attorney Sarah Saldana, the defense attorney Toby Shook. Over the next hour, we'll take you through the what-ifs and the drama of Lee Harvey Oswald, the trial.
Come to me Thursday, November 21st, and asked me could he ride home with me that afternoon. And I said, well, yes. And I said, well, why are you going home this afternoon? And he replied that he wanted to go home and pick up some curtain rods. I looked directly across and up, and this man, same man I had saw prior to the president's arrival, was in the window and taking aim for his last shot.
Please tell the jury your job at the time of the assassination on November 22nd, 1963.
At the time of the assassination, I was an order filler at the Texas School Book Depository.
And was your co-worker, the defendant, one of your co-workers, the defendant Lee Harvey Oswald?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you all have a relationship beyond just working at the Texas School Book Depository?
Yes, ma'am, we did.
And tell the jury what that was.
Well, every week, Mr. Oswald would spend his weeks living in his apartment in Dallas. And on the weekends, Mr. Oswald would ride with me back to Irving, Texas, to spend the weekends with his family.
But he had a different request on November 21st, wasn't it, that Thursday?
Yes, ma'am. On Thursday, the 21st of November, he asked me if I could take him home a day early, back to Irving to see his family.
And tell the jury how it was that you picked up. Did you pick up Mr. Oswald, or did he come by your home, or how did that work?
Well, normally what would happen is I would get in my car and I would either pick up Mr. Oswald from his home, or he would meet me on the street. But that's not what happened that day. That day it was unusual. I was getting ready at my home, and Mr. Oswald approached my house, and I saw him peering through my kitchen window in the morning.
And tell the jury what you saw, if anything, that Mr. Oswald had with him.
Well, he didn't have anything with him when I saw him peering through the window, but once I was able to get into my car and look back, I saw a package that Mr. Oswald had put in the back seat of my car. When we got back to the school book depository, he just carried it parallel to his body and just carried it on into the depository with him.
Did you ever see what was in the package?
No, ma'am.
Was it a package that looked like it could actually fit the gun, the rifle that was used to assassinate the president, government's exhibit number 6, which is sitting here before the judge?
I can't say for sure, ma'am, but
But it was large. Do you have an estimate of how big?
It was 2 feet, give or take a few inches.
Let's put up government's exhibit number 4 if we can. This is an exhibit that's already been admitted into evidence, Mr. Frazier, but I'll ask you, is that consistent with the packaging that you saw Mr. Oswald carrying that Friday morning?
Yes, ma'am, that's about right.
Now, did you, you said, I think earlier, that every Friday evening you would take him home to be with his wife over the weekend. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And did you ask him whether or not he was going to need a ride that Friday?
Yes, ma'am. I asked him that morning if he would need a ride home, and he responded that no, he wouldn't.
Was that unusual?
It's very unusual because he always went home on the weekends.
I pass the witness, Your Honor.
Mr. Frazier, you were outside that building at 12:30 p.m. as the motorcade passed. Is that correct?
That's about right, yes, sir.
Heard the shots, correct?
Yes, sir.
You're a young man, 19 years old, right?
Yes, sir.
Hearing's good?
As far as I know.
All right. And you knew that day, and you told investigators that day that you thought those shots came from the grassy knoll, correct?
Yes, sir.
You didn't see anyone shoot, but that's where you heard the shots, the 3 shots come from, correct?
Yes, sir.
And that's what you believed that day on November 22nd?
Yes, sir.
And that's what you believe today?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, you worked as an order filler, or you do work as an order filler at the school book depository, correct?
Yes, sir.
And so did Mr. Oswald at that time?
Yes, sir.
He'd been working there about 5 weeks?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And obviously that building, you have many, many boxes of books, don't you?
Yes, sir.
All right. And part of your job and part of Mr. Oswald's job was to move those boxes around?
Yes, sir.
All right. You did that on a daily basis?
Yes,
Pick
sir.
them up, put them down, stack them, that sort of thing?
All that.
And obviously you use your hands to do that?
Yes, sir.
You don't use gloves, do you, when you move that around, do you?
No, sir.
All right. Now, let me ask you a few questions about the morning, Friday morning, November 22nd. You said Lee had come to you the day before and wanted a ride home.
Yes, sir.
Out to Irving,
Yes,
which
sir.
you obliged.
Yes, sir.
He wasn't acting really strange, was he?
Not the day before, no, sir.
All right. And then that morning he came by and was peering into your window.
Yes, sir.
All right. Quite frankly, you were running a little bit late that morning, weren't you?
I was a few minutes behind schedule, yes, sir.
Could he have been looking in your window, seeing where you were, so he didn't want to be late to work?
Frankly, I'm not sure why he was, sir, but I just know that it was unusual.
All right. And he had a package with him?
It was in my car, yes, sir.
Okay. He carried that package from your car into the building, correct?
Yes, sir.
And you were asked a lot of questions about that package on November 22nd, weren't you?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And they wanted you to be very precise on how long that package was.
Yes, sir.
Talking about the investigators, the police that talked to you.
Yes, sir.
And you told them on that day, the actual day that you saw it, that it was 2 feet long.
2 feet, give or take a few inches.
Okay. Few inches.
Yes, sir.
All right. And we're talking about 2 feet, we're talking about 24 inches, correct?
Give or take, yes, sir.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
You bet.
Let me show you a tape measure that I've marked out as, if you'll verify, 24 inches.
Yes, sir.
Correct? Will you admit, Mr. Frazier, that 24 inches just comes past this scope? Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And that's 2 feet?
Yes, sir.
All right. Oh, and let me ask you this, Mr. Frazier. You're confident in your ability to accurately judge measurements, aren't you?
Yes, sir, to a certain extent.
That's all the questions I have, Judge.
Thank you, Mr. Frazier. You may step down.
Your Honor, the United States calls Leslie Brennan, please. Ms. Brennan, you were another one of the eyewitnesses to the assassination of the president, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Tell the jury what happened then. What you saw?
Well, right after I heard shots, I, for some reason, looked up at the school book depository and I saw a man in the window make the second shot.
Did you have a clear line of sight?
A very clear line of sight.
And his build, can you describe it for the jury?
He was smaller, slender, I would say.
Have you provided an estimate of the height of the individual?
Yeah, I believe that he was about 5'9", 5'10"-ish.
Let's put up exhibit number 8, please. Now, you were provided this document, and that's actually your handwriting on the document, is that not right?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
This is exhibit number 8, and it's a flat-on shot of the school book depository.
Yes.
Where did you see the person who you just described?
I saw the person that made the shot in the spot that I marked A on this photo.
Okay. And in B, what were you trying to indicate there?
Well, at the time in B, I believed that was where I saw 2 other men, but I'm pretty sure that I was wrong when I marked that.
Now, what do you mean you were wrong?
I actually believe that I saw them in the window to the right under the window I marked A, not in the window marked B.
Can you give a description of those men?
Yes, they were slender as well, African-American men.
Were they looking out over the window?
Yes, you could pretty much only see their faces.
Now, please, is that where you saw the African-American men?
Yes, it was.
I'll represent to you that this was a photograph actually taken at the time of the assassination.
Okay.
Does that look familiar to you?
Yes, it does.
And of course, the window above it, is that where you saw the individual you described earlier?
That is the window where I saw the man I described earlier.
Were you able to connect at any time thereafter the individual you saw in the window above these 2 men on exhibit number 8, exhibit number 9, were you able to identify that person?
That man?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am, I was.
And who was it?
That was Lee Harvey Oswald.
And how did you make that connection?
I was taken to a lineup, and at the lineup, that is where I recognized the man that I saw that day.
Did you actually see a rifle in the window?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Was it consistent with exhibit number 6 here that's sitting before the judge?
Yes, I believe it was.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Cross-examination.
Ms. Brennan, is it your testimony that prior to the shooting, you saw Mr. Oswald actually sitting in the windowsill?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so he's in the windowsill just sitting there, and you happen to look up and see him?
Yes, I mean, I was looking around just like everyone else does when they're sitting around waiting for it to happen, and that is what I saw.
And you're across the street from the school book depository, correct?
Yes, sir.
And Elm Street's a 3-lane street, correct?
Yes, sir.
All right. And the window we're talking about is 6 stories up, correct?
Yes, sir.
We could see government 9 again, please. The window there, that's halfway down, correct?
About, I guess.
All right. And we can see that's what the condition the window was on that day, correct?
Yes, sir.
And the window's very dirty, is it not?
It is.
All right. And in fact, if someone were standing up behind that window, you wouldn't be able to actually see them, would you?
I'm not sure, sir, but I could see the man in the window.
All right. And you've told the jury that you believe he was 5'9", correct?
That's what I believed at the
and
time,
you're able,
yes.
I'm sorry, you're able to determine that by looking up 6 floors, seeing him in the window there.
That's just what I believed after seeing him in the window.
Did you see him standing at full height?
I don't believe so.
All right. If you didn't see him standing at full height, how could you possibly know he was 5'8" or 5'9"?
Just the way that he was leaning when I saw him, it just seemed like he was a bit taller than me anyway, and that was how I judged his height, just like I would judge anyone sitting.
So you never saw him standing, but you feel that you can judge how tall people are by when you see him sitting. Is
To a
that
certain
correct?
extent.
All right. Now, let me go till after the shooting. You talked to the police that day, did you not?
I did.
They interviewed quite extensively, didn't they?
Yes.
And they showed you some photographs.
Yes.
And on that day, November 22nd, they showed you 4 photographs.
I believe so.
And you did not positively identify Lee Oswald at that time, did you?
Well, I don't believe I used the word positively.
Correct. In fact, you said out of the 4 photographs, Lee Oswald looked the most like the person of the 4, did you not?
That sounds right.
Okay. And obviously you knew the president had been shot by the time you looked at these photos, correct?
I believe I'd been informed by then.
You in fact knew someone was in custody by the time you looked at the photos.
More than likely, yes.
All right. And you knew it was very important for them. They were very interested to see if you can make an identification.
Well, of course.
And you knew how important that was.
Yes, and that's why I didn't use the word positively then. I wanted to let them know that that was what I believed he looked like, and that was who I believed was who I saw.
In fact, the first time you used the word positive was several days later when a government agent came and talked to you and showed you a photograph of Lee Oswald. Is that correct?
Yes, I mean, that was when I used the word positively with the officers.
And that was when he was questioning very heavily, leaning on you, wasn't he?
I guess. I mean, that was just more investigation.
Well, we know that back on November 22nd, you never used the word positive, did you?
I did not.
Now, you're also positive of something else, that there were only 2 shots. Is that correct?
I heard 2 shots.
That's it?
That's all I remember hearing.
Your Honor, I'll pass the witness.
Coming up, the rifle found at the Texas School Book Depository is demonstrated in front of the court.
I heard those shots come off, and they seemed like they was high, and they were directly ahead of me. I kind of looked off to the right over there through a doorway and saw an image of a man. At that time, the man never did say anything. I never did say anything further to him.
Lee Oswald is now in custody of police. In this ensuing incident here, a Dallas policeman, 38-year-old J.D. Tippett, was shot to death.
Did you hear the shots that actually were fired at the president?
Yes, as I turned from Main Street onto Houston, I heard the gunshots fired. It sounded like they had come from the top of the building, the School Book Depository building, or the one to its east. It seemed like they came from way up high.
And what did you do once you heard those shots?
I revved up the motorcycle and I drove to the School Book Depository and I parked it up on the sidewalk.
Would you, just from the sound of the shots that you heard, in your experience as a police officer, could you tell what kind of weapon had been shot?
And it sounded like a high-powered rifle.
Tell the jury what you did once you got inside the building.
Well, once I got inside, I wasn't familiar with the interior of the building, and I began to ask people where the elevator was, and a man answered up. He turned out to be the superintendent of the building, Mr. Truly, and he said he would show me where the stairs were.
Tell the jury exactly what happened once you got to the second floor.
Once we got to the second floor, as we passed by the doorway into the cafeteria, the interior doors there have glass windows on them. I looked inside the glass window and I saw a person inside there, and I went and confronted them.
And this chart says that it was approximately 12:31 that you located an individual who was later determined to be Mr. Oswald.
That's correct. I hollered at him to stop, and he did.
What was his demeanor like?
Well, he seemed, I had my gun out and I pointed it at him, and he was slightly alarmed by that, but otherwise he seemed, he didn't seem particularly alarmed. Mr. Truly was with me, and he interrupted the moment. He told me that that was an employee there, and we moved on. Since
the time of November 22nd, did you and other members of law enforcement go back to the building to do some kind of a time analysis of how long it would take to get from your motorcycle parked in front of the Texas School Book Depository to the second floor?
Yes.
Tell the jury about that.
They reenacted the moment where we went from the point of the motorcade up and into the building, and they timed it. It was another person doing the moving, but they took them about 90 seconds on the first occasion, and a little bit less. On the second occasion, it took them about 75 seconds when they were moving faster.
Anybody then check to see how long it would take to get from the 6th floor down to the 2nd floor where you saw Mr. Oswald?
Yes, that was also timed.
And what were the results of that?
It was a similar amount of time. I think that just like 78 seconds.
That's all I have, Your Honor.
Officer Baker, so it's clear you were at the back of the motorcade, is that correct?
Yes.
Behind some of the other cars?
Yes.
And when you heard the shots, we see Main Street right out here at the back of the courtroom, correct?
Yes.
You were turning the corner here, you heard gunshots.
I did.
You immediately recognized those as gunshots, and as you said, you revved up your motorcycle.
Yes.
And you got your motorcycle right down Houston here, right over there to the school book depository as quickly as you could.
I did, yes, sir.
Now you get in there and you find Mr. Truly, correct?
Yes, I did.
Y'all go up one flight of stairs,
Yes,
and that's the 2nd floor.
it is.
And I want to be very clear with the jury, you're not wasting any time at all, are you?
No, I was moving as fast as I could.
And another thing I want to make clear to the jury, you weren't timing your movements, were you?
No, I was not.
Certainly weren't trying to figure out how long it's taking you to get up to the 2nd floor. You just know you were moving fast.
Yes.
And at that time, there was really no reason for you to make note of how long it took you to get up to the 2nd floor and encounter Lee Oswald, was there?
No, sir.
Now that became a big issue later on during this investigation, didn't it?
Yes, sir.
And then that's when the FBI summoned you to the building and they wanted to run some tests.
Yes.
That's when they started asking you questions about how long it took you to get up to when you encountered Mr. Oswald, correct?
Yes.
And that's the first time you were asked to recollect on exactly how long it took you.
Yes, sir.
And obviously you were just guessing, correct?
I was estimating.
And then you also were there when they observed someone, an agent, come down from the southeast corner, walking quickly, and then went down 4 floors down to the 2nd floor lunchroom, correct?
Yes.
All right. And that agent went to the northeast corner first,
Yes.
and then he took 4 flights of stairs down. And one of the things he was having to simulate was hiding this rifle, correct?
Yes.
Then he goes down 4 flights of stairs to the area where you first encountered Mr. Oswald. And he did that twice, correct?
Yes.
I believe one time it took him 1 minute and 14 seconds,
It did.
and another time 1 minute and 18 seconds.
Yes.
So if it had been Mr. Oswald coming down that day, he'd be having to do a lot of things pretty quickly, wouldn't he?
Yes.
He would have just arrived in front of that Coke machine a few seconds before you made it up to the 2nd floor.
Yes.
I think you've told us he wasn't winded, he didn't appear nervous, other than you pointing a gun at him.
He reacted to that, but otherwise he was not nervous.
All right. Judge, I'll pass the witness.
Officer, you may step down.
Your Honor, at this time, the government calls Kenneth Benton. Tell the jury what you do, sir.
I'm a special agent with the ATF,
And ATF standing for what?
Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms.
What's the mission of that agency?
We primarily conduct federal firearms violations, look into crimes of violence, and do all sorts of complex investigations related to those type of violations.
Agent Benton, did you become aware of a film clip being discovered by law enforcement during the course of this investigation of the actual motorcade?
There was a gentleman by the name of Abraham Zapruder who was taking a video.
Have you determined what the speed of the motorcade was at the time the shots were fired at 12:30?
The motorcade was traveling at a speed of approximately 11 miles an hour.
If we can show the Zapruder film. Now, this is actually making the turn off of Houston Street right here in front of this building onto Elm Street. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And stop. Can you stop here? All right. Obviously, something has already happened.
At about the time that the president's view was obscured by that street sign is the time that the first round struck him in the back, and that round passed through him and struck Governor Connolly.
Okay, so what you're telling me is that the sign is about to come into view right here on the lower right there.
That
Is that
sign,
right?
I believe, obstructed the view of the first shot.
So you're going to ask the jurors to pay attention here as the limousine is actually approaching that sign.
And as immediately as it passes the sign as well.
Okay. So the First Lady, as the jury is watching this, has noticed that something's happened to the president.
You can see the president, the first lady, and the governor all reacting to something.
How would you describe the governor's demeanor at that point?
He seems to be shocked and immediately turning his attention to his right and towards the rear.
Okay. Let's continue with the clip then. Stop. There, how would you describe the governor's demeanor at this point?
He appears to be in significant pain to me.
So at that point, you've determined that he's already been shot.
I believe so.
There's another shot that actually hits the president,
It does.
and this is where it gets a little graphic, so let's go ahead and finish this. Shortly after the assassination, 12/30th, 12/40th, did the law enforcement get a report from someone down in Oak Cliff regarding a suspicious person?
They did.
And tell the jury about that.
Well, there was a call about a suspicious person in the Oak Cliff area, and police came down to investigate.
And where was the location of the suspicious person that was being sought?
The Texas Theater, Oswald was observed sneaking in without paying and acting very suspiciously in the theater. So the theater management contacted the police. They came down there, and I was with a group of officers that were there. And as we went into the theater, we turned on the lights and immediately saw Mr. Oswald sitting in a seat. They approached him, and when he got up, he immediately began to go for a firearm. He had a revolver in his waistband, which he reached for. A struggle ensued. The officers were able to grab hold of the firearm, and he was trying to fire the gun, it appears, because one of the officers got his hand between the hammer and the firing pin or the primer on the revolver, was able to prevent the firearm from going off.
Did Mr. Oswald make any statement at the time you all had him surrounded?
He just simply said, "This is it. It's all over now."
Your Honor, if you will permit the witness to demonstrate the use of that rifle to the jury.
This is a model 9138 Carcano rifle with a 6.5 millimeter is the caliber. It has a 4-power scope that would help a person acquire a target and shoot at any distance. Mr. Oswald would have to fire it, track it, fire it, and fire it. Easily done within approximately 8 seconds.
All right, you may put that down, Agent Benton. Now, was this rifle, once it was found in the depository, traced back to the defendant?
It was.
Tell the jury what this is. And if we can focus on the form there at the bottom.
Okay, subsequent, this is the actual thing that a person would fill out in a catalog to order a piece of merchandise, in this case a firearm. And from here you can see that this person using the name A. Hidell placed an order using this address, P.O. Box 2915, Dallas, Texas. And the order was placed to Klein Sporting Goods.
And who owned P.O. Box 2915? Were you able to determine that?
We have been able to determine that that is a P.O. box that is rented by Mr. Oswald in his own name.
Were there any fingerprints found at the school book depository?
There was a number of fingerprints found at the school book depository, and on the rifle.
How about at the perch where the sniper actually fired the shots?
There were books that were, boxes of books that were stacked up in such a way to rest a rifle on, and his fingerprints were found on those.
And do you have an opinion as to whether Mr. Oswald, with his experience in the military and with firearms, could have actually fired off these 3 shots from the distance from the school book depository to where the president was in the motorcade below?
He most certainly had those capabilities.
How far was Mr. Oswald from the president at the time that that first shot went through the president's neck?
I believe it was about 64 yards.
And the last shot, which actually hit his head?
That was 88 yards.
And could this person with this type of training have accomplished that?
Most easily.
Okay. I pass the witness, Your Honor.
May I approach the witness?
You may.
39 inches, correct?
Yes, sir.
And this is not an easy gun to disassemble, is it?
I would not say so.
It would take you some time if you were going to disassemble it, would it not?
It would take several minutes.
There are screws. You need a screwdriver and some tools, could you not? And there's no way to break this gun down into anywhere into the area of 2 feet, is there?
I don't believe so.
All right. Even disassembled.
That's correct.
The stock itself is over 30 inches, correct?
It is.
And you say, and the other thing you discovered when finding this weapon was the scope was off, correct, with its sights?
It was off.
And that's the condition of the rifle when it was discovered in the school book depository?
Yes.
It was off in that if you aimed at a target, it would shoot high and to the right, correct?
That's correct.
And did you determine how much high and to the right?
Approximately 5 inches if it was shot at a target that was over 100 yards away, or a target that was shot 100 yards away.
All right. So if you looked down the scope, acquired the target, and fired, it would actually, if you're at 100 yards, miss what you're aiming at by a good 5 inches.
If it was a stationary target.
All right. Obviously, this is the most heavily investigated crime in United States history.
It is.
And this area, which we call Dealey Plaza, just behind the jurors, agents looked everywhere they could for evidence of the one missing bullet, correct?
We did.
You were unable to do that.
We were not able to find a complete bullet, no, sir.
Now, you are aware that the agents did talk to a man named James Teague, correct?
That's correct.
Mr. Teague was standing right there on Commerce Street next to the bridge, correct?
That's right.
And during this shooting, he was hit in the cheek by an object.
Yes, sir.
And agents found a defect in the curb near him, correct?
That is correct.
They were able to determine that there was some lead in that particular defect, correct?
There was.
And we know that these bullets fired from this gun were copper jacketed, correct?
They were.
Means they're covered in copper?
That's correct.
And the FBI was able to determine that whatever defect caused that was near Mr. Teague was not caused by a copper jacketed bullet that came from that weapon.
That's correct.
No doubt about that.
There's no doubt about that.
Now, you told the jury that there were fingerprints of Mr. Oswald matching some of the boxes there by the 6th floor window, correct?
That's correct.
Obviously, the investigators checked these boxes also for fingerprints, correct?
I believe they did.
Someone, whoever put that gun there, would have to move boxes on top to obscure its view.
Yes, sir.
No fingerprints whatsoever, if there were even found at all, come back to Mr. Oswald from those boxes where that gun was found, was it?
That's correct.
Now, this is a diagram showing the outline of the building, correct?
Yes, sir.
And I just wanted to be clear, this is the southeast corner of the building, correct?
That's correct.
And that's where these 3 shell casings were found.
That's correct.
Judge, I'll pass it.
Okay.
Your Honor, if we can call Dr. Jeffrey Bernard, please. What do you do?
I'm the chief medical examiner for Dallas County.
And how many shots have you determined the president's actually suffered?
He received 2 rifle wounds.
If we can go to exhibits number 30.
Exhibit 30 is a diagrammatic representation of the gunshot wound that struck President Kennedy that entered in the back, really kind of the upper shoulder and neck, posterior neck area, and then exited the front of the neck.
Okay. So just to be sure, we are talking about this entrance wound down here. Are we not?
That's correct.
What is this one?
That's the entrance wound that went through the president's head.
Let's look at that exhibit, if you don't mind, that shows that shot.
You know, this is a diagrammatic representation of the entrance and exit in the president's head. And it shows a smaller hole in the posterior aspect or the back of the head and a large cavitated defect in the side of the head. Again, classic for entrance and exit for a high-powered rifle.
This exhibit number 23 has already been entered into evidence, Dr. Bernard, and it is actually the one that has been commonly referred to as the magic bullet. Do you understand why it's described that way?
I do.
And explain to the jury how it is that a bullet, based on your examination of all the medical information, could pass through the president and without being marked.
Well, that's because it really didn't hit anything. It has high velocity. It enters the back of the neck musculature, goes through the musculature, creates a cavity as it's going through, injuring the trachea, exiting the front of the neck. It hit nothing that would destabilize it at all.
I pass the witness, Your Honor.
Dr. Bernard, so it's clear you obviously didn't participate in this autopsy, did you?
That's correct.
That happened up in Maryland, correct?
Correct.
Let's talk about this. You reviewed that autopsy, correct?
I did.
And fair to say there were some problems with it.
Well, the ultimate conclusions were correct, but it was certainly, there were some things that were not done quite up to normal standard.
It was just done by a pathologist, correct?
A non-forensic pathologist, yes.
You're a forensic pathologist.
I am.
And if we could see government's 23, what some people call the magical bullet, some people call the pristine bullet. Not a lot of damage to that particular bullet, correct?
Not on that side. The base shows some damage.
Talk about just a little bit of defect at the bottom, correct?
Correct.
You've also reviewed the hospital records of Governor Connally.
I have.
And you know that supposedly this bullet was found not on out of Governor Connally's wounds, but on a gurney after he was taken to the hospital.
That's true.
You've talked about this one bullet causing the injuries to the president's neck and Governor Connally.
Correct.
And you explained that one way this could have happened is the bullet didn't hit any structure, any bones, correct?
Enough to destabilize it to fragment, correct.
We know that when the bullet entered the bullet wound to Governor Connally, that his fifth rib was fractured, correct?
That's true.
To the total amount of 10 centimeters.
That's what was reported, yes.
One way that could happen would be that a bullet strikes it, correct?
True. It would have to strike it on the outer aspect in this particular case, but yes.
All right. And obviously something shattered the governor's rib, correct?
Yes.
Because it caused a very serious injury.
Yes.
It fragmented, and those fragments went and caused damage to his lungs.
That's true.
And we know if that bullet actually hit the governor's rib and shattered it, that it's going to cause a defect, correct?
It may or may not mark the bullet, yes.
And you've seen plenty of bullets in autopsies that they hit any part bone, that can cause a defect, correct?
Can cause, yes.
Now, that's the norm, is it not?
Depends on the ammunition.
All right. Now, we also know, at least it's the government's theory, that that bullet exits and then hits the governor in the wrist, correct?
Correct.
And actually fractures the wrist, correct?
That's true.
In fact, the operating notes, they explored that wound.
They did.
It actually cut his tendon in the wrist.
One tendon, yes.
And they found bullet fragments throughout the wrist.
They did find fragments, yes.
Okay, so we know, at least according to these notes, there's bullet fragments in the thigh, there's bullet fragments in the wrist, correct?
That's what's reported, yes.
Okay, so we're getting a lot of fragments in the governor's body, correct?
There are fragments, yes.
Honestly, doctor, if we've seen the photograph, that bullet's not damaged well. If it actually hit his rib and penetrated his wrist, normally wouldn't you expect to see more damage from that type of bullet?
You certainly can. Again, you're dealing with a military ammunition, but yes, you can see that.
Judge, I'll pass the witness.
Next, the defendant's widow, Marina Oswald, takes the stand.
1:35 this morning, a complaint was read. It charged that, quote, Lee Harvey Oswald did voluntarily and with malice aforethought kill John F. Kennedy by shooting him with a gun, end quote.
Marina, do you believe that your husband killed President Kennedy?
I don't want to believe, but I have too much facts, and facts tell me that Lee shot Kennedy.
Following the reading of the complaint, Oswald said, that's ridiculous.
Marina, did you love Lee Oswald?
Yes, I love Lee, and I sorry him.
You what?
I'm sorry.
You're sorry for him?
Yes.
Ms. Oswald, how long were you married with the defendant?
About 2 years.
Okay. What's your native country?
Russia.
When were you married?
April 1962.
And describe to the jury what your life was like with the defendant.
Well, it changed when we actually came over to the United States. At first, it was very fine. I say fine, relatively fine. But then when we came to the United States, things have changed. Lee changed. And I never knew that he had such a great affection for guns.
What did you see that you can tell the jury that makes you say that?
Well, we used to have a screening porch that he sat on, and he used to play with his rifle there. And I never actually saw the gun, but I heard him using the bolt.
Did he practice with it?
Yes, that's what he told me.
Okay. And Exhibit 6 has already been admitted into the evidence. Is that the rifle that you're talking about with respect to the one he was always obsessing with?
Yes.
Do you know how he got it?
I think he got it via mail order.
Exhibit number 16. Tell the jury how it is that that photograph was taken.
Yes, that's the pictures. That's the picture I took, and I was hanging up diapers, and he came up to me with this camera. I don't know how to use that. He just said, press the button. So I pressed the button, took a picture.
And is that the rifle he owned at the time that you were talking about?
Yes.
Which is the same rifle which is exhibit number 6?
Yes.
And do you notice in his pocket, what is that? Or to the right above his pocket?
That's a revolver.
Excuse me?
Revolver.
Did you notice that he was toying with a rifle or cleaning it or practicing with it more than at any other time?
I think that was the demonstration.
Okay. Let's pull up Exhibit 39. When you say demonstration, are you talking about his participation in the Fair Play for Cuba organization?
Yes.
You knew he had some desire to go to Cuba?
Very much so.
Did you come to get angry with him over his activity with the Fair Play for Cuba committee?
Yes.
And when was that?
I think that was when I discovered that he was using a different name, fictitious name of Hidel.
When did you last see your husband before you learned about the assassination?
The night before.
And what happened that evening?
He came over and to Ruth Payne's, and
is Miss Payne where you were home where you were staying at the time?
Yes.
In Irving?
That's right.
Go ahead with your story.
He wanted, I believe he came for 2 reasons: to pick up his rifle and to make up with me, because we had a quarrel.
When did you come to learn about the president's assassination?
I was actually watching television and with Ruth, and that's how I learned it.
Over the television?
That's right.
And what was your reaction?
Both of us, Ruth and I, we became pale, and I went to my room and cried. And then Ruth told me that somebody from the depository actually shot at the president.
She told you that that's where the shooting occurred?
Yes.
And what was your reaction when you learned that?
My heart dropped.
Why?
I just instantly somehow knew that was Lee.
Did you remember that there was a rifle at the house?
Yes.
What did you do?
I ran to the garage immediately to see if the rifle was there.
And what did you discover?
I saw the blanket in which he kept the rifle, and it looked to me that the rifle was there, so I calmed down.
Did the Dallas Police Department conduct a search of your home, of Mrs. Payne's home later that day?
Yes.
And what happened with respect to this rifle?
I actually saw that the police opened up the blanket and the rifle wasn't there.
And what was your reaction then?
It was clear to me that it was Lee at that point.
I pass the witness, Your Honor.
You're not a citizen of this country, are you?
No,
You want to become a citizen of this country, do you not?
very much so.
You're from communist Russia, correct?
USSR.
And you don't want to return there, do you?
No.
And you know the federal government will have a lot to do with whether you return there or not, don't you?
Yes.
All right. Now, as far as this rifle goes, you said that he got it out sometimes and you heard him practice with it, correct?
Yes.
And that was actually when you lived in New Orleans, correct?
Yes.
You're not telling this jury that he was practicing with that gun there in Irving, correct?
Yes, correct.
You knew that the gun was kept in the garage, correct, in a blanket?
Yes.
But you don't know when that gun was taken, do you?
No.
Pass the witness.
Up next, the defense presents its case. And now, the conclusion of Lee Harvey Oswald, the trial.
Would you tell us your name, please?
I'm Caroline Arnold.
And how are you employed, ma'am?
Well, I'm the secretary to the vice president at the school book depository.
All right. And do you know this man, Lee Oswald?
Yes.
And how do you know him?
I know him from work. We're not friends or anything, but he had a habit of coming to me for change.
All right. And he started working there at your building on October 16th, 1963, correct?
I think that's about right.
Let me turn your attention to November 22nd, 1963, when the actual shots were fired. Were you inside or outside the building?
I was inside.
All right. Let me let you focus on 12:15. You recall that time?
Precisely.
All right. Where were you at 12:15 p.m.?
Well, I was on the second floor of the school book depository,
Okay.
in the lunchroom in particular.
All right. And at 12:15, did you see anyone in that lunchroom?
Yes.
Who did you see?
I saw Lee.
Okay.
He was sitting in one of the booths in the lunchroom.
All right. Any doubt in your mind it was Lee Oswald in that lunchroom at 12:15?
No, I saw him clearly.
I'll pass the witness, Your Honor.
Now, Ms. Arnold, you have no idea where Lee Harvey Oswald was at 12:30 on November 22nd.
Well, as I told Mr. Shook, I saw him around 12:15. It may have been a few minutes afterwards, so.
And let me repeat my question. You have no idea where Mr. Oswald was at 12:30 at the time that the president was assassinated?
No, ma'am.
That's all I have, Your Honor.
Ms. Arnold, you may step down.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Call your next witness.
Call Gail Newman. Tell us your name, please.
My name is Gail Newman.
Ms. Newman, let me turn your attention to November 22nd, 1963, approximately 12:30 p.m. Where were you on that day?
I was standing on Elm Street on the west end of the Concrete Standard with my husband Bill and my two kids
And what was your purpose there today?
to watch the motorcade.
All right. And did the presidential motorcade come by?
Yes, it came directly in front of us.
All right. And when it came by, did you hear and see anything at that time?
Yes, when the president was turning the corner from Houston Street to Elm Street, pretty soon when he got onto Elm Street, we heard a loud sound. Sounded like a firecracker.
All right. And then what did you see next?
And then, as the president got closer, when he was directly in front of us, I felt like I could reach out and hug him. That's when a second sound went off, and I could see the president get hit in the side of the head.
All right. When you saw that, what did you do in reaction?
Well, when I saw the president get struck in the head, then I knew something was wrong, and it sounded like the sounds were coming from directly behind me. So instinctively, I turned around, jumped onto my kids to cover them from whatever was bound to harm them, and fell onto the grass.
Would you please bring up Defense Exhibit 1? We see a photograph here. Is this you and your husband and your children after you went to protect them near the sidewalk?
Yes.
You instinctively reacted to protect your children, and cover them from shots coming from that direction?
As any mother would, I did.
We'll pass the witness.
Ms. Newman, is it fair to say that you were terrified at the time of those shots with your children there present?
Yes, I had to be on high alert to protect them.
And no question, your primary concern, your entire focus at that moment was your children.
That's correct.
And if I told you that there are experts that have testified before this jury and said unequivocally that the shots that killed the president and wounded Governor Connally came from behind, away from the grassy knoll, you wouldn't dispute those experts, would you?
All I know is that I felt the shots were coming from behind me, and I believed it that day, and I still believe it today.
You felt that?
Yes, I did.
That's all I have, Your Honor.
Okay. This is the verdict of the jury that you must find either guilty or not guilty. We, the jury, find as follows regarding count 1 in the indictment, that is assassination of the President of the United States within the territorial jurisdiction of the United States in violation of Title 18 U.S.C. Section 1751A. Lee Harvey Oswald, guilty or not guilty?
Of course, we'll never really know what would have happened in the trial of Lee Harvey Oswald, but there is something to be learned from that fateful day and the days that followed. We're curious to hear your thoughts. Did these court proceedings and evidence presented convince you enough to convict Lee Harvey Oswald of the murder of President John F. Kennedy? Tweet us using the hashtag OswaldGuilty or OswaldNotGuilty. A special thank you to the State Bar of Texas for letting us participate in this project. For everyone at Channel 8, I'm Gloria Campos. Thank you for joining us.